Well, hello again. We got them finished, and actually they've been finished for, as of this filming, they've been finished for quite some time. The only thing I haven't done yet is put my logo on the blade. We're getting ready to make the sheaths, which is why we've got them laid out on some leather. So now what I'm ready to do is I'm going to lay the weld portion on there. Just get it where I want it to go and just slide it in. The knife's not been sharpened yet, so, and this is one of the reasons why. Yeah, that's going to clear that tip down there. I just kind of radiused that out a little bit. Alright, so now I'm just ready to lay out and mark the drainage hole. Alright, so it's going to let water out, and it's going to let enough air in anyway, but these are important. And I'm ready to laminate these together, except for one little step. And what I have to do is I have to form my belt loop first, because it's going to be sewed down here. So I got to do that now. And I want to back up. I want to do one more right next to it. There we go. So that's a nice even line for that to break on now. So I just put it in here. Not squeeze it too tightly, and I give that water plenty of time to soak in, then I'm just going to form my bend. That's pretty much all it needs. And when it dries, it's going to hold that shape. And this cement sets up pretty quickly. Just when the shiny is gone and it kind of hazes over, bring it down. Then watch your pencil line, because you got to get this right just about the first time. Once this grabs, it doesn't let go. It could tear the leather. So yeah, just push it down, and you don't have to clamp this very heavily. Just pop it like that, and then walk away from it for a little bit, and come back, we'll just run a stitch around it. Alright, I've laminated the three pieces together and took it over to the belt sander. I just cleaned everything up nice and sharp. Now I need to take my edge tool and go around both sides excuse me, of this. Then I'm going to lay out my stitch line. Okay, so we're going to fast forward about a month and a half from that last clip where I cut the channel. Everything's finished, and so I ran my stitching into that channel around the perimeter, and then I wet formed, and making sure that the leather really formed a pocket for that guard to seat down into, so it holds the knife tight, it doesn't rattle around, and the weight of the knife rests on this weld section. And it's the purpose for that is to keep the tip down from the tip of the sheath. I don't want it rubbing around in there and doing any damage. So the tip is actually up off the very bottom of the weld down here, about a good 1/8 of an inch, and that's just going to keep it from getting damaged. Then after wet forming, after it dried, I take a mixture of neatsfoot oil and beeswax, and I put that into a little pot, heat it up and melt it, and then I heat this with just a heat gun, a blow dryer. And while the leather's nice and hot, I rub that mixture into this for several minutes, and then I let it harden, dry, buff the surface, and we're finished, and we have a nice weatherproof sheath. Water's not going to get in there, and it also serves to harden the leather and make it less flexible. You don't want this flexing and letting the point of the knife creep through the sheath, so I think it's protected in that area. And then on the belt loop, I formed this belt loop. It'll take about 1.5 inch wide belt if you have one that size. And when it's in, it's going to hold the knife in close and not let it flop around. Both knives are made with that in mind, or both sheaths are made. And then the knife itself is finally finished, meaning I've got my logo on there. And one of the things I changed up about how I apply my logo is I use a new machine now that supplies DC and AC current, depending on which one you want. And I use both when I do these logos now. The DC current cuts a good deep etch, nice and sharp, and it goes in about 0.005 of an inch, and nice and deep. And then the AC current will blacken the inside of that with a good hard oxide that won't buff out, so it makes a good lasting trademark. So, calling it a finished knife, and I like the way it turned out. Love the maple handles, and there is just a slight taper to that tang, but it serves to balance this knife. This knife kind of pivots around this guard, which is what you want for something like this. It's a fighting knife, so you want to be able to move it and do all the things that knife fighters do, I suppose. But I haven't sharpened it, and I won't. See no reason to. It'll hold an edge when I put it on there, and of that I'm sure. But I'm glad to get it done. And then of course, its companion knife is ready, and it's logoed, and I think it really complements its bigger brother. And I just made a pouch style sheath for this one, wet formed as well, and it really grips the knife nice and tightly. And put the logo on that too, using the same process, and I am pleased with the machine, that new machine, and what it does. So glad to get this set finished. I'm happy with it, and on to other things. And one of the directions I'm thinking about going in, and in fact I am going in, I've already started. This is a little deer hunting knife I made about 15 years ago in Tennessee. I made a bunch of these, and they're walking around all over the place down there. But this is the one, kind of the prototype for this model line. And I lent this to a buddy of mine who took it and used it for an entire deer season. And these guys get a lot of deer. He said this knife went through about 4 whitetail before he brought it back to me in the spring. And he loved the way it performed. It's a nice, heavy little knife for its size. It's 3/16 stock. And he liked the size. He said the only thing, he said, I could think of to make it a nicer knife for me, he said, is if you can make this a folding knife. And I thought about that all these years, and I finally decided to use this as an inspiration for a folding knife about this size and scale. So we're going to be going in that direction. And another change that I'm making is in the steel I'm going to be using on some of those folders. I have found a heat treating procedure for Crucible's 154 CPM, which is a good knife steel. The reason I've not used it in the past is I didn't have the equipment that I thought you needed to heat treat that grade of steel. So their engineers came out with a system by which I can use my present heat treating equipment, which is just oil hardening. It's an oil quench procedure. You just kind of you swap things up on the temperature, and then on the draw is a little bit different. But you'll see that when we get to that point. But when you're making folders, when I get through with my prototype and get it to something I like, I want to be able to repeat that. So as I'm making the prototype, I'm making some jigs and some fixtures that will allow me to do it again and again and again with some repeatability and some efficiency. So you'll see some of that. Another big change I made was in the stitching department on my sheaths. And what I did was I bit the bullet and I went and got a pretty darn serious stitching machine. This is solid cast iron. It's hand operated, and it turned what normally would have been about an hour-and-a-half long job to punch and stitch these two sheaths into a 10-minute job. And it uses the same bonded nylon thread that I used hand stitching. It just does it faster and really more uniformly. So I like the results. So that's it for this series and this pair of knives. Feels good to have a concept, especially when you've wanted to make, as long as I've wanted to make this Sheffield style Bowie. And it feels good to have it done and on to other things. But yeah, I'm happy with it. This is one that I'm glad to get in the books, but I can take it out, look at it, and feel good about it. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video when we're getting on the folders. You have a great day.